Welcome everyone to the Two Guys in a Cooler channel. I hope you're having a great day. My name is Eric and I am glad you could make it because today we're going to mix it up a little bit. We're going to be talking about pemmican, but from a slightly different perspective. Now, if you're not familiar with what pemmican is a Native American survival food that supposedly has an extraordinarily long shelf life. And a little over 3 years ago, we did a video on how to make pemmican. It's called Pemmican, the Ultimate Survival Food. It sat inside of our queue for 8 or 9 months before we got around to editing it. And around 2020, beginning of 2020, we uploaded it to our YouTube channel. And we've gotten a lot of questions about pemmican. All right, so welcome to the Q&A version of pemmican. Let's get started. Question number 1, can you use different meats to make pemmican? And that's a really great question. In our original video, we used beef, but traditionally beef would not have been used because it wouldn't have been available. More than likely, it would have been buffalo, probably venison. So really whatever game meat that you want to use is okay for pemmican. I've seen it made with chicken. I've seen it made with rabbit, deer, elk, buffalo. I've seen it made with duck. I mean, basically you're just drying the protein and then adding some sort of a fat to bind it all together. So whatever meat you choose to use will probably be okay. Next question is, does authentic pemmican contain fruit? And the answer is yes and no. Original pemmican would have been made without fruit and it would have been made with fruit. And the reason fruit would have been added was probably to add a little bit of sweetness and make pemmican a little bit more palatable as it was being sold commercially to, travelers and new settlers. In one of the versions of pemmican that we made, we did use fruit. We used blueberries, bananas, we used cranberries and apricots, and it added an incredible sweetness to that smoky, dried meat powder mixed with rendered tallow, and it made it very palatable. So if you're going to make pemmican, you can use fruit, and whatever fruit you want to use is fine, or you can not use fruit, and both ways would be okay. And that brings me to the next question. Does the addition of fruit lower the shelf life of pemmican? And the answer is yes. So if you have pemmican made with strictly dehydrated meat, meat powder, and rendered tallow, the shelf life can easily be 25, 30, 35 years, no problem. But the moment you start adding fruit, you're kind of adding sugars to the meat, you will reduce that shelf life. Now, it really all comes down to what you're looking for. Arguably, shelf life of pemmican with fruit, especially like the kind of fruit I added, that's going to have anywhere between an 8 and 10 year shelf life. So it's still pretty long. But if you want to maximize the shelf life of your pemmican and actually use it as, a survival food that you want to make ahead, something for your bug out bag, you might want to consider not adding fruit and just making a meat version for long-term shelf stability. All right, moving in the right direction. The next question deals with storage. How do you store it once it's done? And the absolute best way, in my opinion, to store pemmican is in a vacuum seal bag or a Mylar bag in a cool, dark place. In a minute, we're going to take ours out of the container. I'm telling you, I have yet to open it. It's been 3.5 years, and I'll show you how I store my pemmican. But let's go on to the next question. Do you need $10,000 worth of equipment in order to make pemmican? So in our original video, we made pemmican using a lot of the equipment that we already had. We had smokers and dehydrators and all kinds of kitchen accessories, primarily because we run a commercial kitchen. But clearly the original makers of pemmican did not have all that equipment and they made it just fine. But I can assure you that if they did have equipment at their disposal, they most certainly would have been using it. Now, with that being said, if you saw our original video on how to make pemmican and you would like to see a more low-tech version of that, matter of fact, we did a follow-up pemmican video that used absolutely zero electricity. I'll put a link for it right about here, so you can check it out after this video is over. All right, let's talk about fat. We get a lot of questions about fat substitutions. Can we use coconut oil? What about lard, butter, ghee, things like that? The fat that we used in our pemmican was suet. And suet is the hard fat around the kidneys of the cow. When you render that, it's called tallow. And you got to remember that fat is a very big ingredient in making high quality pemmican because you're basically replacing the moisture and you're adding in fat. And that's what makes it so shelf stable. The other thing to remember about fat is its melting point. What's the melting point of the fat that you want to use? Suet, when you render it into tallow and leave it at room temperature, that liquid tallow will actually solidify, unlike lard, butter, or coconut oil, which tends to get relatively soft at room temperature. Why this is important is because you're going to want to use a fat, especially if you want a survival food that travels well, that doesn't melt so quickly. You can technically use whatever fat you want. Just make sure that it's 100% pure fat, no milk solids in the event that you want to go the butter route. And I think using coconut oil with, let's say, dehydrated chicken would make an absolutely delicious and brilliant pemmican. The only problem is that you would have to keep it in the refrigerator or the freezer, because as soon as that chicken coconut oil bar got to room temperature, it would become very soft and it probably wouldn't travel very well, but it would still be very tasty. Our next question deals with RimWorld. How many Rimmers we got out there? We gained a lot of views, got a lot of questions, and a lot of subscribers from those of you in the RimWorld community. And I'm not even sure how many of my videos you guys actually watch, but at least you now know how to keep your settlers and possibly yourself fed with pemmican. So if you're not aware, RimWorld is a survival sort of strategy game. It's pretty extraordinary, and we played some music in our original pemmican video that a lot of you thought sounded similar to the RimWorld soundtrack. So those of you who came to us through RimWorld and wanted to know whether or not the music we chose was intentional, the answer is unfortunately, no. It was purely coincidental. Matter of fact, I didn't even know what RimWorld was until you guys started leaving comments in the comment section, and I had to go to the other guy to ask what it was, and the next thing you know, I'm hearing things about the spiffing bread, and you know the deal. Truth be told, back in 2019, I would sit in front of my computer, edit this video, and try to put myself in a place where pemmican was being made. And all I could think about was desert, Texas, New Mexico, tumbleweeds. And so I started Googling tumbleweed music, and this is what came up. Funny enough, it sounds very similar to the RimWorld soundtrack. So now you know. All right, what else we got? Can you add nuts or, dehydrated vegetables to your pemmican? Absolutely. You can add just about whatever you want to your pemmican. I think honey, chocolate would both be interesting ingredients. Dehydrated mushrooms or carrots, even nuts would be a great addition to pemmican. The only thing that you have to remember is that each ingredient has its own shelf life. Take nuts, for instance. They have their own oils that might go rancid over time. So when you depart from the traditional meat and fat version of pemmican that naturally has an enormous shelf life, we're talking 25, 30 years, for each ingredient that you add, including fruit, you're going to reduce that shelf life. By how much? I have absolutely no idea, but I'm pretty sure you're still going to have a protein bar that's high in calories that will last you a long time. So just one thing to be aware of. Another question, and this one is quite tricky, but here we go. What is the nutritional value for pemmican? And let me kind of present a scenario for you first, because all of the calculators that I used to figure out the nutritional value only measure out raw ingredients. They don't measure out dehydrated ingredients. So let me present this to you. If you have 1,000 grams of meat, and those 1,000 grams of meat have 261 grams of protein, raw, but then you dehydrate the meat, and now you only have 200 grams of meat, do you still have 261 grams of protein, or does the protein change somehow during the dehydration process? So that was the issue that we were faced with, and that's probably why my nutritional, caloric count for pemmican seems a bit weird. But we started with raw ingredients, and this is what we came up with. So if you come up with something different, by all means, let me know, but that's my best guess. Obviously, this is just for meat and fat. If you start adding vegetables, chocolate, nuts, fruit, then the sugar content, the fat content is going to slightly change. But there you have it. And our last question, one that's been met with the most anticipation: what does it taste like today? And I got to tell you, I have no idea. We're about to open this up for the first time in a little over 3 years. This is the original pemmican that we made in our original pemmican video. Each block has been vacuum sealed. It's been placed inside of a pickle jar, and we've just had it inside of our pantry and just kind of forgot about it. So let's go ahead and open this up and give it a taste. Ooh, nice. So, you know, even in the vacuum seal pack, you still get that smoky, beefy aroma coming from it. It actually smells really good. And the way that we have it is, you know, we have these just individually packed in vacuum seal bags. They've never lost their vacuum. And so this has been in there for, like I said, a little over 3 years. This one's got 3 small cubes in it. Let's see here. We packaged them up roughly, you know, 2-inch by 2-inch blocks. All right, here we go. Our pemmican, we're gonna give it a taste. First time in over 3 years, see how it is. And I just gotta say, it looks great. I mean, no mold on it. It is firm to the touch. There's a little bit of give to it whenever I squeeze on it pretty firmly. It smells smoky, smells beefy. You are picking up some of that sweetness from the fruit. Moment of truth. Notice there was no mold growing on our pemmican. You definitely don't want mold growing on your stored food. And the reason is because we stored it in a vacuum seal bag. Mold has a very difficult time growing when there's no oxygen. So either vacuum seal your pemmican in small portions or place oxygen absorbers in with your pemmican, and it will certainly extend the shelf life. Now remember, pemmican was often used as an ingredient to make other dishes. You would add it to your stock, add whatever foraged ingredients you had, and you could feed several people without a whole lot of pemmican, but you could clearly just eat it by itself, which is how we're going to do it now, and it'll be a calorie-dense, protein-packed little bar. So what does it taste like? Okay. All right. So let's talk about the flavor. The flavor is exactly how I remember it when I made it 3 years ago. It is a little sweet. The salt that we added kind of elevates that beefy flavor, and it's a little smoky. The texture of the pemmican is pretty firm. As you eat it, the tallow starts to melt. It does have a tendency to coat the mouth a little bit, so the inside of my mouth feels just a tiny bit waxy, but nothing off-putting. If I had to be completely honest, could go for a giant glass of water, but overall, this is absolutely delicious, and I can certainly see where this would be a great addition to a soup or a stock or some kind of quick meal you could throw together in the woods. And I hope you get a chance to make it if you haven't made it yet. If you do, or if you make some version of pemmican, I'd love to hear about it in the comment section below. I appreciate you watching. I hope I answered all your questions. If for whatever reason I missed one, leave it in the comment section below and I'll try to get to it. Thanks for being here. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Thumbs up if you liked the video. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.